And we're live. I'm super excited that you guys are joining me today. Thank you so much. I am here today with Omuugn. And if you do not know Omuugn, he is the author of The Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. And my green screen is blocking out the image. It looks like this. And today we are talking from pages 131 to 134. And today's topic is on commitment. Oh, such a tough topic, commitment. And like Omuugn said, this can go in so many different directions. But what we're here to share with you today is the power of commitment and how it can change your life. So please help me welcome Omuugn.
Well, good morning. It's good to be here. Beautiful fall day in Eastern Oregon, and life is good.
Yes, it is. And as it's good, I know that not only have you followed through with several commitments, being that you have a series of 2 books. This is not just one, but actually 2 books that have just come out. But I know that you have a 3rd one that is right on the trail behind it. To give us just a brief snippet about your next book that's coming out this week.
It's a children's book called Fearless Phil, and it kind of explores the imagination of a child, showing the excitement in the world that a child lives in. And it's basically written in poetry to introduce a child to that form of expression. And it's easier to remember and to relate to if it's in a poetic form. A very simple poem, but very, very exciting adventures with dragons and jet airplanes and animals in the jungle and sea creatures and all kinds of things. So it should be fairly interesting.
I have seen the book itself, and I want to say I don't think I've ever seen another book that has sharks and cowboys and jets and aliens and dragons and dinosaurs and mermaids. And I mean, it's got all of the things you would ever want from an imagination. And I just think that's so cool that it's all in one place. It's just fascinating.
Well, I have a relatively large family, and a lot of the inspiration from the book came simply by observing my children as they grew up and all of the adventures and all of the things that they did that they really enjoyed, all of their pretend things. And so it started out actually as a song. I wrote a song, and it eventuated into this book that's finally being published. So
in addition to it being a song turned into a book, we happen to have a world-renowned illustrator on that book, and the pictures in there are amazing.
Yeah, Phil Wilson was one of the lead illustrators for Walt Disney, and a lot of the cartoon pictures that they produced through the years, Phil Wilson was the lead illustrator on those. So very, very well done.
Well, I'm really excited for you, and that speaks to our topic today, which is on commitment. And it takes a lot of commitment to not just think of something, but to create a song and then to turn it into an illustrated book, and then another level of commitment to actually get that to market. So before you tell us what commitment is, tell us a little bit about the commitments that you committed to in order to get your book to market.
Well, it's been actually a long process involving many people, and I had no idea that it was so involved getting a book to market. A lot of paperwork had to be signed, and disclosure statements and contracts and all kinds of things, which I really admire the Lifelong Publishing Company that oversaw the project, because they did a marvelous job that I'm really excited about. So yeah, it was very involved, and the reason that I stayed committed to seeing the project through was that the song and the experience that I've had with the children through the years, they still enjoy those things. And so if it's kind of an enduring enjoyment, I thought it might be passed on to the grandchildren and other people who might enjoy it. So the commitment was just to stay with it until it was available to everyone who wanted to experience it.
I love that. All right, now let's break down what commitment actually is. Now that we know that that you're speaking from experience, and that you and I don't say that this is the first time you're committed, because to have 19 children, I tell you, that is a huge commitment. Oh my goodness. But let's break down what commitment actually is.
Well, it was one of the traits. The reason I wrote the book in the beginning was we're a compilation of a lot of different traits. And if you look at each trait individually, you can kind of evaluate how you're doing in that trait. Whereas if you look at your life just generally, I'm doing okay. A lot of traits are swept under the carpet, so to speak. So this was a way of bringing a focus on a particular trait. In fact, commitment networks with other traits. You get into trust and loyalty and all kinds of things. So the trait of commitment can stand on its own. For example, it's being dedicated and loyal and bound to an obligation or a promise, which is it's networked with dependability and integrity and persistence and all kinds of other traits. But it's a conscious decision to undertake a course of action to fulfill a responsibility or maintain a relationship despite challenges and difficulties that we all encounter from time to time. So it's a strong dedication and loyalty to a cause, person, or project. For example, your religious belief system. People believe in something, and it takes a commitment to adhere to that over a period of time and to act responsibly. And there are things like a marriage contract where people are committed to each other. In fact, in today's society, almost half of marriages end in divorce.
But they all started with a commitment.
But they all started with a commitment. And so there must be something inherently wrong with the way we make commitments many times. That's why this was identified as a trait that we need to improve upon. Not only marriages, but how many of us have made, for example, New Year's resolutions? I know that I use the same ones every year because I need to be better committed to actually analyzing what I'm committing to and asking myself if I'm actually going to follow through this time and make it successful. So a lot of times we kind of sort of commit to things, but we don't really commit to them, and we don't really know what is involved in a commitment. Persisting and enduring challenges and obstacles, being consistent over a period of time, and allocating the adequate time and energy and resources, and even our own emotional support to uphold and undergird the commitments that we make. So that's kind of what commitment is in a nutshell.
Well, you just mentioned our own emotional support. Are you suggesting that we ourselves are responsible for following through on our commitments, even if it's tough?
Um, the essence of commitment is being personally motivated. If we have to be externally motivated, having someone else kick us in the seat of the pants, then we have a tendency not to be so committed. And so, first of all, we need to differentiate. There are different kinds of commitment. Like a marriage is a lifelong commitment. And we should put a lot of insight and dedication to that commitment. But there are other commitments like I'd like to lose a little bit of weight. And so I can set an arbitrary goal. I can impose upon myself timelines and feel bad if I don't hit them, but they're arbitrary goals that I've set. So some things are really kind of permanent and some things are temporary, and some commitments really have a real value in our lives, like our commitment to our Creator or our religious belief, and our marriage partner versus I want to lose 5 pounds this month. They're kind of in different areas. So we need to evaluate those and realize that some things are in our control, some things are not in our control. Sometimes we set goals and objectives where outside influences control much of the things that carry on that we have no control over. And so if we miss our deadlines or we fall short in our commitments, sometimes it's really not our fault. It's through external circumstances. So we need to evaluate all of those variables and look at commitments very carefully, the things that we do control, the things that we can't control, the things that are really, really important, and the things that are temporary, that we just impose deadlines upon ourselves. So all of that needs to be evaluated.
So what is the difference between making an evaluation and saying, I'm going to lose some weight, and then saying, oh, but they served me some chocolate cake for dinner, and whoopsie, I didn't meet my goal because these were outside external factors that interrupted my commitments.
Well, that's where we look at our commitment in sort of a priority way. For example, if I want to lose weight, but like right now, next week is Thanksgiving dinner.
Mm.
And
I'm looking forward to that.
we all do. Thanksgiving is a fun time. And there's very, very good, delicious food to choose from. And there are usually a lot of pies and pastries and things that you wouldn't eat normally, hopefully. And so, yeah, we need to look at our goals and objectives realistically. How am I really going to live? Am I going to isolate myself at Thanksgiving dinner because I don't want to break the commitment that I've made to lose weight and to follow this particular diet or something like that?
Can I add something? Since we're talking about Thanksgiving next week, I am going to eat Thanksgiving dinner next week, and I'm planning on eating some pumpkin cheesecake. And in addition, leading up to that, because I am on a weight loss program right now, I'm intermittent fasting today and just drinking my chia seeds and water as my only substance of food today, so that I can get skinny before the Thanksgiving dinner, so I then can have the pumpkin cheesecake when the time comes. I'm making deals with myself. Is that possible with commitments?
Well, if that's in the commitment itself, that you allow for birthday parties and Thanksgiving and things like that, you can keep your commitment, but not break your commitment by enjoying what you enjoy. So you can design your commitments around the lifestyle that you want to live. But the secret is to be faithful to whatever it is you commit to. If you absolutely commit to, say, a keto diet, and you sit down for Thanksgiving dinner and they have rolls and a lot of starchy foods, you're going to break your commitment if you enjoy those foods for Thanksgiving. So, yeah, make your commitments realistically, depending on your lifestyle and what you want to accomplish. If you have a consistent lifestyle and then you break it every once in a while for something you enjoy, that's really okay. But if you're breaking your commitment all of the time, you're really not committed at all. You're just sort of deceiving yourself. For example, you mentioned intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is really important for our health. Our body responds toward autophagy when we intermittent fast. And autophagy is where your body is using its own waste materials and fat sources to produce energy, instead of you having to bring in more sugar and glucose to have the energy that you need. So intermittent fasting requires a commitment to eat in a certain time frame and then to abstain for so many hours. And so if you're committed to intermittent fasting, then you really have to dedicate yourself to the time frames when you eat and you have to just realize that snacks are not a part of that program. So if you enjoy watching a movie and while you eat popcorn and do other things like that, it's not going to fit into that program. So if you're going to commit to intermittent fasting, that takes a lot of self-discipline and a lot of sort of see through the whole process for a long period of time. It's not just a hit and miss thing every once in a while. For it to be effective, you have to do it every day, and it becomes a lifestyle. So,
Well, and my lifestyle was not working. I feel like I'm a pretty committed person, but it wasn't working. And I'm gonna blame it all on menopause. And I said, if I want radically different results, I'm gonna have to be willing to do radically different things. And so what does that look like? And oddly enough, I started with the intermittent fasting, but when you start to commit to something, and we're talking about commitment, if I'm actually committing to change my life, it goes beyond just the intermittent fasting. And if I'm going to become healthy, what does that look like? Well, that also includes exercise, and that also includes sleeping at a regular time. And what's really peculiar is this: I usually get 3 to 3.5 hours of sleep per night. And I realize that's not good for me. I know better, but I haven't committed to a healthier way of living. And so when I started doing radically different things, what is radically different for my sleep? That would be like twice as much sleep, which is like 6 hours a night. And I bought a Fitbit and I started tracking my sleep on a nightly basis. And then literally saying to myself, I got to go to bed earlier so that I can get up early to go to the gym and so that I can exercise and I can lose the weight and I can do the intermittent fasting during the day and I can get back in shape. And it was radically different from everything that I've been doing. And the results have been radically different. But every day, as hard as it is, because I still wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, it can't already be time to get up. And then I'm like, but wait, I promised myself radically different results by doing radically different things, which means I'm going to get up and I'm going to go work out and I'm going to do it even if I don't like it until I create the new habit. Because you made a comment about it's the consistency that's going to create those habits. And I'm not in the flow of the new habits yet. I still wake up every day just challenged, like, why am I doing this to myself? But yes, it's better than, I mean, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so this is a change, right?
well, the essence behind it all we call self-improvement. And there are just many, many different facets of our lives, like you're saying, your sleep and your exercise and your diet and your relationships with other people and your religious pursuits and your community pursuits and your business pursuits, all kinds of things. And so we want ourselves to be optimally able to engage in all of those things. And in order to do that, we need to look at all of those areas, and it requires creating a balance in our life. Our families are really important, but so is working for a living and producing what we need, relationships with other people, all different kinds of things really require a lot of commitment from us. And all of that commitment needs to be balanced. And it all revolves around self-improvement. And self-improvement consists of identifying each area that we want to improve in and setting particular goals and objectives in that area, and then being able to hold ourselves accountable for the commitments that we make in those particular areas. So it's an entire program that sort of fits together. We want to be balanced, we want to be committed in every area, but we don't want to chew off more than we can chew. For example, if we try to make a radical change in every area of our life at the same time, it can be it can be overwhelming. So we need to prioritize things, and we do that sort of by living in the moment, by being mindful, by sitting down and asking ourselves important questions like, what is really the important thing for me to do today? For example, I am a great grandpa, and I'm a grandpa, and I'm a son, and I'm a brother, and I'm an uncle, and I'm a nephew, And I have all different kinds of relationships, and I have responsibilities in all of those areas to be ideally, for example, an uncle. I have nephews that I should interact with from time to time. So I need to determine what all of those relationships are and what would be ideal for me as a grandpa or as a father to relate to people. I need to set aside the appropriate time. Maybe it's just to send out birthday cards and Christmas cards and be aware of the graduations that are taking place and extracurricular activities that people are involved in. I need to be a part of that in some way to support them and encourage them. And so there are just so many demands on our lives that it could be overwhelming. So we need to be very careful that we don't overcommit, or if we were ideal in any one situation, other situations would fall by the wayside. So sometimes you have to compromise and say, I can do this much, and I should do this much, and I will do this much. And so I'm committed to this program. Uh, the way we have done it at our house, for example, is my wife and I work together in a lot of areas. And so some of our commitments are joint commitments. For example, sometimes I will order, for example, the birthday cards or the graduation cards or something like that. And she will make sure that everything is on schedule because she tracks all of the birthdays and all of the anniversaries and all of the graduation things and on and on and on. And so then she will bring me a stack of cards and say, this month, these are the things that are taking place. And if you'd like to fill out these cards, that would be very nice. And so we work on those and mail them out. It's sort of a joint effort, a joint commitment to stay in touch with everyone. And sometimes it would be overwhelming if I tried to do that all by myself because there's so many commitments in so many different places. Sometimes we just need help. We need to be part of a team. We need to create things that work so that they will work the right way. And sometimes that's delegating responsibilities and working with other people. And you have to design your goals and objectives realistically so that they fit into your life. Otherwise, you're discouraged all the time. You missed this birthday and you didn't get this card out, and you missed this and you didn't do that, and it's frustrating. You lose your self-worth. You devalue yourself. You feel incompetent, and it can be a really destructive cycle. Whereas if we're very, very careful when we make commitments, when we analyze things and look at balance of things, our life should be very orderly with the time constraints, the resources that are available, and put everything together and then make our commitments that we're actually going to keep and be faithful.
So what I hear you saying is be selective about the commitments that you make and say no to the commitments that you know you're not going to follow through on so that you can do a better job at actually following through on the commitments that you do make. Is that about right?
Yeah, sometimes you just have to say no. Uh, Sometimes maybe because of your schedule, you don't have time to do everything. But maybe instead of tracking every activity, for example, of grandchildren, I have half 100 grandchildren, and the activities that they're involved in are so numerous that I could get lost in that. But I don't want to get lost in remembering their birthday and making special time with them. So there are things that I can do, but I can't do everything. Uh, we just have to be very, very selective when we make our commitments.
So tell me a little bit about commitments and credibility and how commitments lend or build credibility.
Well, I think that is really quite self-evident. If you're depending on someone for something, if they don't perform, you lose your trust and your confidence in that person. If someone says they're going to be here at 8 o'clock and 8 o'clock comes and goes and they never show, you can't depend on them. You can't trust them. You can't rely on them. And so by following through with our commitments, we develop certain characteristics and traits that everyone experiences being around us. They look at us as though we're dependable and trustworthy because we follow through on our commitments. And if you neglect things, you can get yourself in a lot of hot water very, very easily.
Well, one of the favorite insights and wisdom of Omuugn for me has been be the kind of person that you can count on under all circumstances at all times. And it's interesting to me because I built an entire cleaning profession based on that one concept. And we did show up when we said we were going to be there. People said, "Oh, you can set your clocks by Angela and her team. They show up exactly when they say they're going to be there."
Mhm.
And I didn't know that that was such a big thing in the cleaning industry. Like a lot of people, I guess, make appointments and then they don't show up when they say they're going to be there. But we got hired and we kept jobs because we were there when we said we were going to be there, which it seems like it's simple enough.
Yeah, one of the things that introduces itself into this whole idea with your business as well as other aspects of life is that there are a lot of misconceptions about commitment. For example, some people think that commitments are permanent, but actually, the reality is that we have to be flexible in our commitments because there are a lot of things that are changing all of the time. I think of Sears and Roebuck. Here's the largest retailer in America. They have stores everywhere. And if you're going to run a business, you would pattern your business after Sears and Roebuck. But all of a sudden, Sears and Roebuck declares bankruptcy and they go out of business. The largest retailer in the United States went bankrupt and went out of business. Why? Because they were rigid in their commitments in the way they did things. And as times changed and instead of being flexible and moving with the markets and moving with the needs of people and things that were happening, Sears was in a rigid commitment style that didn't relate to consumerism. And
Mhm.
so being flexible and adaptable and realizing that things are changing is a big part of what commitment is. Another misconception is that it's easy, and it's really not easy to be committed. You have to have ways to hold yourself responsible and to be accountable and to be flexible and to sometimes you run against a wall and you just say, I have to do something else. What I'm doing is not working. And the same thing with our habits. Sometimes our habits are rigid, but as life changes, like you say, you're going through a stage in your life where things began to change. And so you may have to do things differently. You may have to change your diet. You may have to change your sleep patterns. You have to be flexible to move with what's actually happening in your life. Commitments can't be rigid and fixed all the time, even though they are for a season. And we have seasons in our lives. And like a new mother, her season is with that baby and nourishing that baby and the feeding schedules and the changing schedules and the teaching and all the things that a mother does with a child. That's her season with that child. And that's where her commitment is. And as the child goes to school and the mother has more time at home to do other things, then the commitment it flexibly changes to something else so that there's more balance in other relationships and other activities and things that need to be done. So we have to be aware of the seasons in our lives and the changes that are taking place. We have to be adaptable and flexible, and our commitments need to do the same thing. They need to flex with us and move with us. And uh, some things don't change. We have core values. Your core values should not change. There are universal laws and foundational principles. They don't change. And so when you make commitments, you should have in mind the core values that undergird those commitments, the eternal principles upon which your commitments are founded. Some things don't change, but some things are adaptable within certain parameters. That's called homeostatic equilibrium. So you're not going to change the overall thing, but you're going to adapt that thing to what's actually happening. So that needs to always be in consideration.
I'm so
Another,
glad that we had this conversation today because I need to hear this really, really badly. I just told myself today, like today, this very day, that I'm going to write a book called Kick Me If I Volunteer. That's going to be the name of it. And it's based on the fact that oftentimes people are in need of things. And in the conversation with them, I say, oh, well, let me take care of that for you, or let me send that to you, or let me help you out of this situation. And I find myself, and I think it comes back to people pleasing or what have you. I want to help other people. And it comes from a good place in my heart, but it does lend to overcommitment. And if I really want to be committed, what you're telling me now is I've got to pick and choose the commitments that I make in order to follow through with them with all due respect. And so the name of my book was going to be Kick Me If I Volunteer. Like, don't let me volunteer for things that I'm not going to be able to follow through on. So I really need to hear this message today.
yeah, we have a lot of misconceptions with commitment. One of them is that we need external validation. And if you need external validation for your commitments are not based on the right things. And like you say, sometimes you just have to say no because that's a low priority thing for me. There's a lot of things on my plate, uh, and I don't need external motivation to have me commit to this thing. I can look within myself and determine what I'm capable of doing, and I can validate myself because I only do the things that I'm personally committed to. Other people are not going to commit for me, like like you mentioned in this example. People always want you to do things that will be beneficial for them, and that can take up all of your time and energy if you're not careful.
Well, I remember the turning point for me was at a church that volunteered me to bring a casserole to a scout banquet. And the part of me is like, sure, I'd be happy to help. And then I thought, wait a second, I'm not a scout and I'm not going to the banquet. And why would I be bringing food to a banquet that I'm not even invited to? No, no, I'm not going to do that. And although I wanted to help, and like I say, there's a good part of me that wanted to participate, I said no. I'm not going to do that. And you know what's really interesting? The world did not end. They found someone else to bring the casseroles. And it was me letting go, realizing that, hey, there are other people that can follow through on those commitments. That if those are not my commitments, there's no reason for me to say yes and volunteer or agree to do something that either somebody wished on me or I volunteered to do myself. And I found this a lot in the cleaning business. Somebody would say, oh, can you just throw in these few extra things? Oh, sure, no problem. I can do that. No, I cannot. I do not have the time to do the extra things because it wasn't part of the contract that we had and it wasn't part of today's job. And so I had to stop myself and really consciously be aware that no, I'm overcommitting right now out of the goodness of my heart, but it's going to cause friction and problems later on. That's not going to be a good commitment for me. And I think a lot of us are guilty of wanting to do the right things, wanting to help other people, and having our priorities in the wrong place.
Well, it's a fine line, and you need to be careful because we do need to have, for example, community involvement. We need, even though I don't like to sometimes, we need to be involved in the political process that's going on. We need to support candidates that support the things that we believe in. And so sometimes we're drawn out of our comfort zone to do things that really need to be done. And we need to commit to do those things, even though maybe you're not associated personally with the Boy Scouts, but maybe that's the thing in your community that you can help with that would benefit your community and benefit those scouts. Uh, and sometimes it would be to your detriment to do that, and sometimes you can work it in. So you have to evaluate very, very carefully.
So what I did for me personally was this. This is my own personal rule. I said, if I'm going to be there anyway, I can help while I am there. Meaning if I'm going to go to church, I can teach primary while I am at church. But I can't do the Wednesday night session and I can't bring casseroles on a different day of the week and I can't do other external things. But if I'm going to be at church anyway on Sunday, I can teach the primary. I can do things while I'm there. If I'm going to the homeowners association meeting every time, I cannot follow through and do like neighborhood rounds during the week, but I can show up at the meeting and I can open the door and I can manage the door and manage the registration while I am there. But aside from that, once I leave, project's over. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, if it makes sense to you, it makes sense. Every one of us has to go through that process of what makes sense to us. And all of us need to contribute to all of the various aspects of our lives in a way that makes sense to us, that adheres to the foundational principles and our core values. Some people are so involved in the political process that they're in demonstrations and marching in the streets, and they devote a lot of time to that. And while they do that, perhaps other elements of their life are going lacking, or they need attention that they're not getting.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we have to evaluate. Every one of us has different skills and abilities, proclivities, predilections, all of those things that are built into who we are, our various traits, and we need to respond to that. Some of us have a natural ability to interact with people. We're outgoing, we can interface with people, and having a community interaction is very, very easy for us. And some people are very introverted, and stepping into the community and being involved in a lot of social things really would be out of their comfort zone. And so,
I'm one of those people. I prefer to be by myself, and I spend a lot of time in my business with other people. And so when I have some private time, it's like, I really want to guard it. And so again, that goes back to my if I'm going to be there anyway. And so like I go to the gym in the morning and I chose to go into the locker room with all the people when my instincts are like going to the private locker room where you can just buzz in, get your stuff done, and get out, and you don't have to interact with people. But I chose to go into the one with people because while I am there and I'm putting on my makeup in the morning and I'm getting dressed, I can chitty chat with people and have a social life. But once I leave the gym, then it's over. There's no more social life because I'm going back to my introverted self. But I'm focused on because I do want a social life and I do want to interact with other people. But while I'm going to be at the gym, that's the activity that intertwines with that social experiment, and then it's all over and I go back to my normal business life and what have you. But I'm really focusing on, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier about making your commitments and making them count for something. I want to have a social life and I want to have friends, but it has to be in a very certain compact part of my life because the rest of my time is taken up by other things. And I'm not going to go to a bar and I'm not going to sit there with friends and I'm not going to go out for lunch with the neighbors and things like that. I'm just not going to do that. I don't have time. I'm not interested in doing that. But if I can be putting my makeup on in the morning, which I was going to do anyway, and I'm at the gym, which I was going to be at anyway, and then I'm having conversation with locker room buddies, that I can do. Does that make sense?
it does. And it brings up another point too, and that is that everyone has different needs. And sometimes if someone else has a need that involves you, it can be a complex situation. For example, there were 19 children in our family. And so if you were a real extrovert, it was difficult. And if you were an introvert, it was difficult because the extrovert was dealing with introverts and the introverts were dealing with the extroverts, and everyone was sort of out of their comfort zone. But there was always a lot of things going on so that the extroverts could kind of do their thing together and the introverts could avoid those things. But we had a situation where we had a neighbor who was he was a single person, and he lived by himself, and he was lonely all of the time. And when he met our family, here was the ideal situation for him. There was there was something going on all of the time, and he could interact with people, and it fulfilled all of his social needs.
Mm.
But here, We were trying to run a very strict program with the family, keeping all of those variables. We had schedules, we had work times, we had times where we practiced music. We did homeschooling, and so our schedule was very articulated in every area. And all of a sudden, here's a neighbor who comes in and wants to be part of our family all of the time to meet his needs. And so we actually had to sit down and say, how are we going to deal with this? Because here's someone who wants to encroach upon our lifestyle. We want to be committed to being a friendly neighbor and helping people that we can, but we also are committed to running homeschool and the programs that we were running. And so we had to actually sit down and devise a way to interact with this neighbor that would meet some of his needs, but not let him interrupt what we were doing as a family and our structured schedule.
I'm sitting here
So,
so curious because I can think of 6 people and it could be any one of those 6 people. But
well, there were,
I do know that as a family, we attracted a lot of people that were like that. They found something always going on that fit one of their needs. And I think that was a norm for us to attract people into the family that were like, "Hey, wait a second, I can participate here." And oddly enough, the family always made them feel very welcome.
yeah, we actually overstepped our bounds many times. We would see a family that needed help. There have been times that we've even moved families into our facilities for a period of time to help them get on their feet and encourage them in any way that we could. And sometimes that disrupted our schedule and what we were trying to accomplish. Uh, we There was a family that had 5 small children, and they were just going up to the canyon because they had no place to live. And so we brought them into our facility while they could sort of make some decisions and get on their feet. And it seemed like it was for months, and people tell me that it was for a couple of weeks. It seemed like months in a way to me. But I came home from work one day and there was a U-Haul trailer in my yard, and they were unloading things from that U-Haul trailer into my yard. And their intent was just to move in. They had found a very comfortable place to live, and their intent was to stay there.
Hmm.
And so my commitment to help a family all of a sudden just went way over the top for me. And I said, "Hold on, wait just a minute. This is not going to work. You need to take all of those things that you just took out of the U-Haul and put them back into the trailer, because 2 families living in the same situation is not a long-term quality objective for either family.
Mhm.
And so you need to decide what you're going to do. I've tried to give you some time to do that, but now you need to go on to your next step, whatever that is."
Mhm.
So those external things are always, they're not really setbacks. They're not really, uh, well, it's just a natural flow of life that things don't progress like you think they will. And you're always going to just run into someone who needs help. You hadn't planned that in the morning when you got up, you had your day scheduled, but here you run into someone who needs help. And so you want to be able to help people where you can. A lot of those things are spontaneous. So our commitments need to be that flexible. We need to be committed to our structure and what we're trying to accomplish. We can't let someone come in and override what we're trying to do that is high priority for us. And so we just need to pick and choose and do the best that we can, but not let other people dictate to us what our commitments should be. We need to decide that for ourselves.
I love the
Excuse me.
fact of having commitments with boundaries. And I know one of the most powerful phrases that I have learned to use, both in my business and my personal life, is this phrase: what I'm prepared to do is this. So if somebody were to move their U-Haul into my house and I was like, no way, this is not going to happen. Hey guys, this cannot happen. But what I'm prepared to do is this. I'm prepared to put you guys up in a hotel for the night and let you guys figure out what your next steps are. So at least you've got a shower, you've got a place to sleep tonight, and tomorrow you're on your own as far as finding where your next home is. Right. So in my mind, what I'm prepared to do is, and I always try to make some kind of a concession that's even, it may not even be meeting them halfway, but this is what I'm prepared to do. This is what I'm able to do and what I can commit to without going all ho heavy on, I can't do any of those things and I can't help you out. What I'm prepared to do is, and then try to do something small that then doesn't break my commitments with myself and my family, but stays within those boundaries that says, y'all cannot move in on top of me with all your kids and all your stuff.
Yeah, those things need to be clarified for sure. Well, there's someone that we know. I won't mention any names, but they can talk for hours and hours and hours,
Is it
and they'll
me?
call. It's not you, by the way,
Oh, good.
but they will call, and they simply don't have a lot going on in their life, I guess. But they can talk for like 4 or 5 or 6 hours,
Mm.
and so when they call, you need to be able to say, hey, I have an appointment in a half an hour, and so I've got a half an hour to talk with you.
Mm.
And at the end of the half an hour, you say, I'm sorry, but I have an appointment that I need to go. And you can work with people, but it needs to be on your terms in your way so that you can follow through with your commitments. And your commitments, when you have goals and objectives, they have time constraints, they have resource constraints, they have all different kinds of variables that you have to take into account. So again, you don't want other people to tell you what your commitment is going to be. That has to be coming from you and from the way you have designed your life and structured things so that it fits into your lifestyle.
Well, and that's interesting that you bring that up because I do have a conversation every week with my mom. And I love the conversation. And this is one of those elongated conversations that can get out of control. But one of the conversations that we had early on was one of setting boundaries. And we both agreed that since we're both really busy people, that we wanted to talk to each other every week. But, and here's the caveat, we both allow the other person to do other things while we're on the phone. So like when we're on the telephone, I'm dusting my house or I'm cleaning or wiping something up, and mother might be making dinner or something else. And so we joke with each other like, hey, what are you doing right now? Well, we're on the phone with each other, but at the same time, I'm either out walking in the neighborhood or I'm cleaning my house or something, and she's fixing dinner or watering plants or something else. And so it's us living our own lives, but having a conversation at the same time across the miles. And so it's not just undivided attention, nor would I ever expect that from her because I know she's busy. So kind of like, hey, let me chat with you while you're doing your housework or whatever it is. And I think that makes it, I don't want to say easier, but I think since the boundaries have been clarified, we both know that it's okay. And if at any time during the conversation she has to bounce out, like, oh, hey, something just came up, we'll pick up where we left off next week. And so at any time during the conversation, it's okay if she has to bounce out and say, hey, I got to go. Okay. No harm, no foul. I'll see you next week. Right.
Yeah, we actually had a neighbor, the same situation as this lonely gentleman. She was a lonely uh, person. Her husband had passed away years before, and she lived alone. She had a personality where her friends were very few and far between.
Mhm.
Uh, for example, she would come over and say, you haven't invited me over for a meal for a while. Why don't we do it Wednesday night and let's have this and this and this? And would you furnish it? And I want all of the leftovers.
Whoa.
That kind of a person. And she would come over, and if you were out working in the yard, for example, she would expect you to sit down and devote your time to her. But we got in the habit of inviting her to engage in any project we were on. If she came over and we were working in the yard, we'd say, hey, here's a rake. Why don't you talk to me while we're raking the lawn or doing something else? And we found a way to make her productive while she was there. And when we did that, she would come less frequently because there was always an assignment for her when she came. So yeah, we need to design our commitments around these flexible situations and deal with people in a way that meets our needs, not just their needs. If she wants to visit with us, she can visit, but let's be doing one of our projects while we're visiting,
That
kind
is
of a
one of the
thing.
most productive solutions I have ever heard. Involve other people in your commitments. And if they are demanding your time, they can participate or they can go home. I love that. I just love that.
It has proven to be a real boon to us. And another facet that I want to talk about before we end today is that in order to make good commitments, we need to be mature.
Mm.
And as we grow up, you expect everyone to mature as they grow up. But a lot of people, for example, are emotionally immature, or they may be socially immature. Some of the things that we've talked about are people who are socially immature. They can encroach on your time and they don't think anything of it because they're not socially responsible. They haven't really developed that quality. And so we have to have a way of working with people that encourages them to mature. And we need to look at ourselves introspectively to see whether or not we are mature. In other words, how emotionally am I handling these commitments?
Mm.
If I overcommit and I fall short, what does that do to me internally? Do I get frustrated? Do I get discouraged? Do I stop in my commitment because I feel like I can't successfully do things? We need to look at ourselves in such a way that encourages us to include in our self-improvement program maturing emotionally and maturing intellectually and maturing spiritually. If we are mature spiritually, we're going to approach everything differently. If we can handle our emotions, we're going to approach things differently. And we're not going to be upset easily. We're going to look at situations very objectively. And if someone is encroaching on our time, like this woman, we need to step back and say, this woman has needs in her life that are somewhat being fulfilled by coming over here and interacting with my life. And I want to honor that, but at the same time, I don't want her to sort of take me out of my comfort zone in my commitments and what I'm trying to accomplish. And so we need to look at all of the different areas of life, not only for ourselves, but the people that we live around. And if they are immature in certain ways, it would be helpful if we could encourage them or enlighten them or help them in some way to mature. And uh, there are many ways to do that. You can do that through stories. I could tell this neighbor about the fellow who was encroaching on our time, and maybe she could learn vicariously with our interaction with him so that she wouldn't make the same mistake. And we could give her some insight into how we relate to people by giving her an example of a prior experience that we've had with someone. So we can look for ways to interact with people that would encourage their maturation. But we also need to look at ourselves. Am I really immature emotionally? If I have a setback, or if things didn't turn out like I expected in my commitment to lose weight, how do I respond to that emotionally? Does that encourage me to stay with the program and to work harder? Or does that discourage me and make me want to stop and go back to my old habits? How
You know,
many?
you brought up something earlier when we talk about the diet, and we had mentioned diet earlier. But one of the things that was interesting to me, because going back to your commitment, I do want to cheat on my diet. I mean, I'm not going to be ugly with you, but I would like to cheat on my diet.
We all do. We all do.
But to do that and keep my commitment, I decided for myself, in order to be able to keep my commitment on a regular basis, that I would have one fun meal a week. And the one fun meal a week, anything goes. It's dessert, it's eating out, and we go out because we don't want to bring it into the house. If we bring it into the house and there's a big tub of ice cream in the house, if we don't eat it all in this meal, it's easy through the week to think, oh, hey, it's still in the freezer. I could go have a little bit. But if I don't bring it home and it's not in my freezer and I don't have access to it, then one meal a week, I can go out and I can have anything I want during that meal. But the rest of the week, I have to stay on schedule. And what's interesting about that is like Thanksgiving next week will be my one meal. And so I'm looking forward to that because that's going to be my one meal. It's not the whole day, it's just one meal. And the good news is during the rest of the week, I'm really focused then on being committed to that. And I think you have to build in, because you said there's a lot of flexibility in life. And in order to keep our commitments, we have to be willing to be flexible. But in doing that, if we are able to think into the future, and I think this is where the emotional maturity comes in, where you're going to say there will be a flex time. And so in order for me to have the Christmas dinner or the Thanksgiving dinner or the birthday dinners or whatever, that needs to be my fun meal of the week so that I can stay on track the rest of the week and then focus on having a celebration when the time comes, not letting that be the norm, but the exception to the rule.
Yeah, it goes back to the law. Everything goes back to an eternal law and a foundational principle. And this principle is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so if you break your commitment, say on your diet for Thanksgiving, there is a consequence to that. And you say, well, in my commitment, I'm taking that consequence into consideration because I know that my body is going to respond differently if I eat a different diet, even if it's for a day. And in my case, we have a lot of family coming in for Thanksgiving. There will be probably 40 or 50 people here. And so my Thanksgiving dinner will probably be a week because
Yay!
people are coming and going, and we're going to have to restructure meals for the entire week. So we still have to realize that there are consequences for that. Uh, One of my children, for example, took me on a cruise several years ago. A fantastic experience. Thank you, by the way. And during that week, I gained 12 pounds and I had a marvelous week. In fact, if I had continued to live on that cruise ship, I would have eaten myself to death in probably a month or two. The food was so good and the experience was so good. It was just an enjoyable time for me. And so my commitment was to enjoy the trip, and I really did. And I have a brother-in-law who went on a 30-day cruise. And in that 30-day cruise, he lost 5 pounds because he was so committed and so rigid to the program that he was on.
Wow.
And I thought, how horrible of an experience would that be?
I can't imagine going on a cruise and losing weight. That seems like totally backwards.
But anyway, there are consequences for what we do. And we need to take that into consideration. And that's one of the essences of being mature emotionally and intellectually and spiritually is that we're able to make our commitments based on core values and foundational principles. And they're easier to adhere to then because we have that belief system that undergirds what we're trying to accomplish. If we have a commitment that's just out in the night somewhere, like I've decided to be a vegan, well, you're going to run into all kinds of circumstances that will challenge that. And unless it's based on a real understanding of what you're doing, it'll be hard to follow through with that. And I'm not knocking vegans. Vegans is probably a good way to eat and a good diet. So anyway,
as you talk about commitments, though, I want to highlight one thing, and this is something I have personally observed about you. You have made commitments throughout the course of your life, and then you have jumped through all kinds of amazing hoops to make them count. And you created your own self-sufficiency by growing your own gardens and having orchards of food and canning food. You've raised 19 children and then homeschooled them. Those are huge commitments. And then we were talking earlier about you producing books. You studied and you did a bunch of research and development and learning and teaching, and then you compiled that into books and you took those books to the market. Your whole life has been a series of commitments, leading by example. And if there's one thing that I've observed from you, it's that the commitments that you have made, you followed through on. You've made good on your promises. And I think that makes you a person that's trustworthy. It makes you an incredible mentor to me personally, because as I've watched you, it's not just talk, but it's let me show you how to live. And then you've laid the foundations, and then you've led by example. And I just really want to commend you for that, because that is not words, but deeds. And I really appreciate that, knowing you for my entire life and knowing you that you are willing to do that. The road that you have been on has not been easy. And yet every step of the way, you made conscious choices that then would stand the test of time. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And I know our time is about up, so let me just close with this series of thoughts really quickly. Set clear and measurable goals. Write down your commitments. Make a contract with yourself so that you can follow the contract and be held accountable. And share your commitments with others so that you have a support system around you. Use the technology available to you like you say, you have a Fitbit watch or calendars or way to track things. Visualize yourself being successful. Track your progress. Reflect on your values. Hold regular review sessions with yourself. Reassess and adjust your goals when need be, and celebrate all of your achievements and pat yourself on the back when you do faithfully commit to something and follow through. And sit down and practice mindfulness, living in the present moment, and just in life should be enjoyable and pleasurable, and you should just be satisfied with your life. And if you're not, for any reason, identify that, set a goal, and be committed to that goal and improve your life, because it can all be done. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. For those of you that are joining us and those of you that are watching the replay, these are the insights and wisdom of Omuugn. And you can join us every Saturday morning as we unpack the next in the series. So if you haven't already, get your copy today, and we will see you same time, same